While students often come to this class already with a basic familiarity with Excel, they have often never heard of Power Query before, so we're going to gradually introduce ourselves to this software. Power Query is a data preparation tool that is present in the background of both Excel and Power BI to extract, transform, and load data from a variety of sources. Its primary function in both platforms is the same: to automate data cleaning and reshaping tasks, to prepare the data for analysis and presentation. Its user-friendly interface allows non-technical users to handle complex data transformations without needing to write code, which greatly simplifies the ETL process. Please start by extracting this week's lecture materials. When you download these from Canvas, they will appear as a compressed or zipped folder. So navigate to either your downloads or wherever it is that you've stored the zip folder and click on it. You might have an option up here that says Extract All. If you don't have that in your File Explorer, right-click on it and select Extract All. Just accept the default options and click Extract. And here we have our lecture materials. The file where we will be doing our work is the template to submit Excel workbook. So let's start by opening it. Here we have a table containing data on a hypothetical company's customers. For context, let's assume that this is a subscription-based company, and this table will constantly update as new customers sign up, contact information is edited, and when customers cancel their subscription. Let's assume that our boss has assigned us a new job. At the end of each month, we need to identify customers who have canceled their subscriptions and shoot them some sort of a newsletter email in the company's efforts to win back some of these former customers. To be honest, we're not looking forward to this job. Somebody's got to do it, but what annoys us most is repeating the same exact steps over and over each month. We're not allowed to edit this data directly. Each month, we have to copy and paste the entire table into another workbook and perform the exact filtering steps to identify the correct subset of customers. Now, the last person who was in charge of this job, they tried to cut corners by just using the same list of former customers each month, but this led to problems. Customers who resubscribed were mad that we kept sending them emails asking them to come back, and we weren't reaching any of the newly canceled former customers with that static list. There's got to be a better way. And there is. This is where Power Query comes into play and can help us automate nearly all of these tasks. The first way I'll show you how to connect to a data source in the Power Query editor is by using a table in the current workbook. Like with tables, make sure that your active cell is somewhere in the data. Then go up to the ribbon and select Data. Find the Get and Transform Data pane. Now, if you are using an older version of Excel, this might look a little different, but don't worry, it's fine. The buttons you click will largely be the same. They just might be in a slightly different location. I'm going to click on From Table/Range. Excel automatically extends the selection to the continuous range of data, and by default, it assumes that the first row of our dataset contains column headers. In other words, names for each of the fields in our dataset. Now, this is absolutely true for us, but even so, I am going to uncheck this box in order to demonstrate later on how to fix something like this if we import data with headers and it doesn't recognize them. Now click OK. This then launches the Power Query editor. Obviously, what is immediately displayed is the data we just imported. On the left-hand side, we can see a list of queries. The first one has been named Table 1 as a default, but we can change this to something more descriptive. You can rename the query by right-clicking and selecting Rename, or on the right-hand side in Query Settings, you can name the query right here. Since our task is to send out emails to solicit business from former customers, I'll call this Win Back List. And here we can see it's been renamed. One thing to point out, we will no longer refer to this as a table of data. It really is a query at this point. So what is meant by this term? A query is a request for data or an action to be performed on the data. All of this text and numbers that you see here in the middle of the screen, this is just a preview of a transformed data set. we haven't actually made any changes to the underlying data. We haven't asked the editor to perform any actions yet. We will, but as we do, that underlying data is not changing. We're going to be clicking a series of buttons and doing all sorts of stuff, applying transformations to create a final output data set. But in reality, what the query editor is doing in the background is assembling a batch of computer code, a sequence of steps to be applied to the data we've connected to. Now the data may change, but our query will not. We are programming steps to be applied every time. So let's apply some of these basic steps. First, we notice that all of these fields now come with the names column 1, column 2, and so forth. And our first row is actually the column headers we want to label each of our fields with. Now remember, we did uncheck the box when we initially imported this table. 99.9% of the time, you're just going to leave that as checked. I just wanted to show you how you can fix this if you import data from another source and the query editor didn't recognize it, didn't know how to handle the data. So within this home menu, I'm going to go up to the transform pane and click on use first row as headers. Don't click the drop down arrow, just the main part of this button. Click. And as you can see, it has now promoted the first row to be headers of this table. Now each field will come with a particular data type, and Power Query is going to automatically try to detect what each is and format it accordingly. The far left-hand side of any field will indicate these data types. This 123 next to customer ID indicates that it has set this field to be a whole number. First name, last name, all of these address fields through state have been designated as text based on this ABC. Zip code is a number. Birth date is a date time with that clock in there. For the most part, I think these are pretty good, but there are a few things I would change. For example, even if a field consists of only numbers, it is still best practice to set fields to string or text data types if we never intend to perform arithmetic operations with those numbers. With our customer IDs, I'm never going to want to take the average of those or add them up. So to prevent us from doing silly calculations or making mistakes in the future, I want to set this to be text. To change a field's data type, you can go up to the column header, right-click on it, and this gives you a lot of different options. We can go down to Change Type and select Text. We then get a message box saying, hey, you're changing the column's data type, and we already set this earlier in the query. Do you want to replace what we did in the past or add this as a new step? Honestly, I don't care. Either of these will be fine. I'm going to just replace what it did initially when it brought in the data. Now the fact that it is now left aligned and we see an ABC here, this customer ID field, which again consists of only numbers, these are now text. Let's do the same thing with zip code, but this time let me show you a quicker way. You can just click on the data type symbol next to the column name, and it's going to do the exact same thing without presenting all of those other column options. I'll select text and replace. Lastly, with birth date, these customers only ever entered the month, day, and year of their birth, but it has brought in this data formatted with hours, minutes, and seconds as well. I don't need all of that timestamp, so I'm going to change this date time field to just a date and replace. Another thing I might want to do is change the names of these fields. We can see they're all in lowercase, and maybe that's not a big deal. But if I want to reformat customer ID, I could right-click again on this column header, go all the way down to rename, and I can type it again with a bit of capitalization. Maybe that makes it easier to read, and hit enter. Again, there always seems to be multiple ways of doing the same thing in Power Query. So with the next column, I want to rename this to be first name, all the way spelled out. So another way to rename a field is by double-clicking the column header. And then we can rename it. That's a lot quicker. Now that we've executed several transformations to our data set, I think it's time to point out what we've done. Back in the query settings on the right-hand side, we are able to see that we have been applying various steps in our query. In other words, this list tells us every single change that we have made since the beginning. Most recently, we renamed columns, and that tracks, right? We just redid the column headers for the customer ID and name fields. This last step is highlighted because it was the last transformation we applied. But I can click the one right above it, Change Type 1. The data preview in the middle now reflects all the changes we made prior to renaming the columns. And if you look, the column names are back to what they looked like when we imported the data. Let's go one step before that. This would have been before we changed the data types for the customer ID, zip code, and birth date. And you'll notice that they have now been set to the generic any data type, based on how we told it to replace what had been done before. Now, to be clear, the step that we are currently highlighting shows how the data will have changed as a result of our applying that specific transformation. In this one, we had set the first row to be headers, and so that's what we see since this is the highlighted step. But if we make one more stop in our time machine and go back one step earlier, we see what the data looked like before applying that step. And the very first step in Power Query is designating the source of our data. Another thing I want to point out, did you realize that you've now become a computer programmer? That may sound silly because all we've done up to this point was click a few buttons. Everything we've done has been quite simple. But with each step that we've applied, Power Query has been in the background coding up each step. If you look up in this formula bar, we can see the syntax. Our first step involves some sort of function, excel.currentWorkbook and some other stuff. The programming language used in Power Query is called M code. And guess what? I am not going to have you learn any M code in this class. But using our intuition, we can kind of guess what's going on here. This code is saying, to output a table called WinBacklist, start by finding table 1 in the current Excel workbook. At the time we launched Power Query Editor, it designated our customer data as table 1. And now anytime we make changes to it, it doesn't matter. Power Query will still bring in the entire data table and then execute the following steps, which are step 1, auto detect and set data types. I'm glad we didn't have to code up all of that. Step 2, make the first row the column headers. Step 3, change the customer ID and zip code fields to be text, birth date to be a date, and then finally rename the first 3 columns according to what we just typed. So to emphasize this point one more time, the query really isn't the data table itself yet. Our query so far is just a series of actions that we are programming, that we are requesting to be made to an underlying data set. So stay with me now. We'll apply just a couple more steps and then we'll be ready to demonstrate the magic of Power Query. Another common transformation will relate to removing columns we don't need. For our job, let's say that all we really want is the customer's name, their subscription status, their email address, and their email preference. And like usual, I'm going to show you several approaches to doing the same thing. So for our first method, you can select a column, we'll do street, by clicking the column header. You can then go up to the Manage Columns pane in the Home menu and click Remove Columns. Again, not the drop-down arrow, just the main part of the button. And now street is gone. And we can see that we've added another line in our applied steps. You can also right-click on a column header, and among all of those options, the second one says Remove. You can click that. If you hold the Control key down, you can select multiple columns at a time and remove them as well. Right-click, Remove Columns. But let's say I've made a mistake. I accidentally removed the subscription field too, but that was one that I wanted. I can just go back to my list of applied steps and click the X next to removed columns here. This will undo that last action, but you'll notice it has not only brought back the fields that I just barely got rid of, it has entirely undone the removal of all the fields that we previously got rid of. One final way of going about this task is by going up to the Manage Columns pane again, and this time I'm going to click Choose Columns. And here we can manually select the ones we want. I'm going to select the names, subscription status, email, and email preference. And hit OK. As a final transformation, I want to sort and filter my data to the subset of customers that I need for my task. And who were they again? They were those who have canceled their subscription for our services, but are still willing to receive our emails. So to filter our data, I will click the drop-down arrow of a given field, starting with status, and uncheck the box for values I no longer wish to see. For instance, I want status to be canceled, so I'll uncheck active. For email preference, I better uncheck the box for unsubscribed. I'd hate to be sending those former customers an email they don't want to see. I'll also uncheck transactions. We're only going to want a list of emails for those subscribed to everything, as well as our marketing emails. Also, we can only email these people if we have their email address. So I can also go up to email and filter out null values. Null meaning empty, no data there. Lastly, I'm going to sort this data alphabetically by customer's first name. Again, going up to this drop-down arrow, and I'm going to do sort ascending. All right, this looks good. We're now ready to load the data, so I'll go up to the top left part of the screen and click Close and Load. And there we go. Going back to customer data, we can see our original data table that was converted into this blue table 1. And on a separate sheet, we have our list of former customers who we will send an email newsletter. Off to the side, we can see that this data table is the result of running a query, the one we just created that is called WinBacklist. Now, I know we just exited Power Query Editor, but if we want to make any modifications to this query, we can double-click WinBacklist here, and it takes us back to Query Editor. But we're all done here. We've already set up the query to behave like we want, so I'm just going to hit Close and Load again. But now comes the fun part. Let's say we get a new customer who signs up for our services, but immediately cancels. Maybe we offered a free 1-month trial. So let's add this person to our original data table. We'll give him an ID number, and we'll name him Aaron Aardvark. I won't bother giving him an address. We're not going to use those anyway. We'll say he had a monthly subscription that's now canceled. I'll type in some nonsense for an email, but we will say that he is still subscribed to receive all emails. Again, this would have been automatically populated in the sheet, but he is now certainly a new former customer who should be added to our list. So going back to our query table, I'm going to hit refresh. There's 2 locations to do this. We can hit this refresh button here, or we can go up to query and hit refresh. When I do that, oh, there's our new customer. He flowed to the top, because we sorted this alphabetically by first name, and there he appears. Let's try this again. Let's go back to our original data, but this time I'll go up to the top, and here we have Carla Berry. Let's say she becomes dissatisfied with our services, and she also decides to cancel her subscription. Again, to make this point clear, we would not be the ones directly editing this data, but for the purposes of demonstration in this example, we're going to change her status to canceled. We'll go back and refresh our query, and there is Carla Berry. Going forward, whenever we have to do this task, all we have to do is open this Excel file with a refreshed query, and all of our ETL process will have been automated. And let's suppose that making all of these transformations takes us, on average 5 minutes. Doesn't seem like much, but over the course of the year, this will have saved us an hour of work. And not just any work, this is boring, mundane tasks that on its own was not a value add for our organization. But now consider to yourselves certain tasks that accountants do in Excel that both take longer to do and they do more frequently, perhaps on a weekly or daily basis. The amount of time savings can really ramp up. So I invite you to consider work you repeatedly do in Excel and brainstorm ways that you can save your company time and you precious hours of life.